I remember my dad saying there was no clothes for them. They would wear the same clothes on their back, that by the time he got out of prison, all that was left was the collar of his shirt. Like everything was tattered. Um, it was labor camp. That's what it was. And it was really, really difficult. And he had like sores all over his arms, and because they were dirty. And the way they took a shower was the government, the communists, they would shoot in a water hose at them. After leaving the corporate 9-to-5 grind, I became the boss of my own spiritual business, helping others explore and navigate the human experience from insight, wisdom, and lessons learned along the way. Today, I help aspiring spiritual entrepreneurs gain the confidence to share their gifts with the world. Welcome to the Happy Healing Shop podcast. I'm your host, Trang Pham Nguyen, and each week we'll dive into incredible stories of strength, resilience, and transformation. So, if you are ready for some serious breakthroughs, laughs and tears, and stories that will inspire you, you are in the right place, my friend. Let's get started. In this episode of the Happy Healing Shop podcast, we do have some adult language, so please listen with care. Welcome, everyone. I have a really special friend with me today, Sam. He has known me for a couple of years. We used to be neighbors when we used to live in the same apartment. And I decided to bring him on because I think, first of all, I find it kind of weird at this moment, starting out, just talking to a microphone alone and sharing my story. But also when I have someone else with me, especially him, then we can bounce off ideas, bounce off questions and things like that. So today I haven't shared much with, I guess, the public too much about my life story and my journey of how I came where I want to be. So that's what today's episode's about. And thank you, Sam, for helping me out with this one.
No problem. And thank you for the percentage of your show that you guaranteed me in the contract negotiations.
And, throughout the podcast, I'm sure you'll be on other episodes. And I'm very excited to see how people see our friendship and how we joke and that kind of stuff. So I don't even know where to start. Like, do I start when I'm a baby? Do I start actually, I'll just talk about a little bit my culture, because sometimes I think that everyone knows what's like growing up Asian, but then I realize other people might not be exposed to having Asian friends or Asian upbringing and stuff like that. So I guess I have an older brother, and my parents were Vietnamese refugees. So they came around the war, very, very traumatic. Imagine, I guess for my mom, it was really her family. I guess her family had it quote unquote easier. And they were just trying to escape, and they saw an American boat, big ship that was trying to, I guess, collect Vietnamese people, refugees, and they just waved them down. They got on the boat and then they left. So that was actually quite easy compared to my dad's story. And the reason I say that is because, well, for her and her siblings, they were on the boat and they just left. They didn't get captured or anything like that, right? So they did say there were so many people on the boat, there wasn't enough food. So you would literally have maybe a bowl of rice or a bowl of food just to feed you to last you for the whole entire day. And that's it. And I'm thinking like, it's like rice bowl, really small, right? Like the palm of my hands. And then on the other hand, my dad, when he tried to escape, and the reason I'm explaining right now is this will come back to a story I'll tell later. But my dad, he tried to escape Vietnam about 9 times. So it was like by rowboat, by like through the jungle, or that kind of stuff, right? But every time he got caught, he would be put into jail. And Vietnam jail back then was like prison. So you would do labor camp. They would feed you only a bowl of rice a day, maybe. But so each time he got caught, his sentence was longer and longer. And the 8th time he was caught, I think he was in jail or prison for about a year. So, back then there was no cell phones. This is the 70s. So like no, that's an app. Telegraphs, they were invented. And that was the only thing really. So my grandparents thought he was dead. When your son's disappeared for a year, you're like, I don't even know if he's alive anymore. And then so during that time, he had to work the rice fields. It was like horrible, horrible conditions. And then the ninth time he tried to escape, he got caught and he was put into prison for 3 years. And, if your kid's missing for 3 years of that, my grandparents are like, oh, surely he probably is dead. And my dad, imagine working a baseball field, like farming and doing baseball field of like rice paddies, like that size all day. And all they offered to eat was one bowl of rice. And that was it. And him and about, I think it was like 70 people were crammed into, I would say like a standard bedroom, like in an American house, I guess. So they couldn't even lay down to sleep. They had to all sit crunched in like this, and that was how they sleep. That was their living quarters. And they had no, I remember my dad saying there was no clothes for them. They would wear the same clothes on their back, that by the time he got out of prison, all that was left was the collar of his shirt. Like everything was tattered. It was labor camp. That's what it was. And it was really, really difficult. And he had like sores all over his arms, and because they were dirty. And the way they took a shower was the communists, they would shoot in a water hose at them. And that was it. And that was maybe a few days, maybe once a week. So the living conditions were just horrible. And there was once a priest that was there with him. And he said, hey, I was thinking of escape in the middle of the night. Let's go. Let's just escape. And my dad was like, no, I don't want to risk it. And so the priest, he decided to try to escape on his own. And he got to a river. And I think the water, he kind of tripped in the water and lost his glasses. So he couldn't see anymore. And so the next morning, this soldier went up to my dad, said, hey, come here. I need you to come with me. And turns out he took him to the priest's dead body, because they killed him. They found him, killed him, and said, go bury this body. And so my dad buried this body, and he said, like, is it okay if I just take a piece of wood or make a little marker to like put as a headstone or gravestone here, and this soldier did not give a crap about that. And he struck my dad with a gun, like on his back. And my dad said, I will never forget that pain of him striking me in the back. And so no, there was no marker. It was just bury him and go back to your pretty much the living quarters, the prison. And also my dad said in that room, there was no toilets. People would just defecate or pee in the corner. And when he was sitting there, some of it would splash on him. It was just, yeah, miserable. Anyway, so and then the way he escaped was each time my dad got caught in jail, somehow word would get back to my grandma where his location is, or my grandparents, and she would they were so poor. So she would try to sell her daughter's jewelry or whatever to like get money and or borrow money and be like, please, I need to get my son out of jail. And she would do that. And my grandpa, like after like the fourth, fifth time, he was just like, he needs to learn his lesson. But obviously he didn't mean that. But, it's just like, why do you keep trying to escape Vietnam when you keep getting caught? And then finally, the ninth time, there was a guy that was leaving the prison because he already finished his term. And so my dad said, can you take this small piece of paper and roll it up in the seams of your shirt? So like the communists cannot see anything at all. Or like detect when they're trying to pat you down when you leave. And it said like, this is your son. I'm under the alias, this name, like this fake name. I go by this fake name, and I'm in this prison in this province or city or whatever. And so finally that guy, he was able to deliver it to my grandparents, who thought my dad was dead. And so my grandpa, back then there wasn't transportation. They didn't have cars. So he would walk or maybe bus. And this was like an all day ordeal to get to that prison that my dad was, because it's a different area of the country, of the entire country. And what he did was he had a sweet potato, and in it, he drilled a hole, and in it was like a rolled up piece of paper and that's how he would secretly send a message. And so when he met my dad in prison, they cried. And when my dad was eating that sweet potato, he got the message, and it said, do not admit anything. So it's pretty much saying, don't admit anything to the communists or anything like that, because they will use that against you. Anyway, so my dad was in that prison for, and And that might not be the ninth time. It was just the many times that that happened. And finally, the ninth time when he got out and was released, and he came home to my grandparents' house, his hair had grown already. This was 3 years, right? And my grandpa like shooed him away from the house. He's like, go away, because he thought he was a homeless person.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Um, and so eventually my dad, when he escaped, it was uh he went on a boat, and there was this guy that was kind of in charge of he was spearheading the escape, and he would like watch the communists to see how many times he would when they sleep, when they watch guard and all that kind of stuff. And then finally he said, okay, meet me at this time in the graveyard, uh and I will flash my flashlight 3 times, and that's me, and hide under a trash bag under this gravestone area. And so fast forward, my dad made it onto the boat, and they escaped, like him and a boat of 100 people. But the thing is, they were trying to get to, I think, maybe Thailand, but there were so many storms and things like that. So it was a very rocky boat ride, not a cruise ship ride at all. So, and the thing is, eventually there were Thai pirates that came by, and they crashed on purpose into the boat. So it can't run anymore. And all the women were raped and thrown off board.
Jesus.
And they were left there for probably a week out in the middle of the ocean to pretty much die. And I think my dad said it was maybe 1 mile away from the shore that they can see. And so they had no food, they had no water. They would what do you call it? They would hang a tarp, and that would collect the rainwater and funnel into like a gasoline cans, which is what all they had. And then they would drink out of the gasoline cans, the canisters. And then finally, one day my dad was like, we got to swim, like we got to go to the shore, because we can't survive out here. So I think it was maybe, I don't know, like 25 to 50 people left on the boat. And he took a gasoline can, emptied it to use it as a buoy. And he was so weak, because you haven't eaten for like a week or had food, water, or anything like that, except rainwater. And he just like closed his eyes, he prayed. And this is where I think religion can help people give faith in moments where you're like, there is no hope, right? Or almost no hope. And then he just said, he closed his eyes and he paddled. And then eventually made to shore, and only him and about 10 people total made to shore. That was it. And then eventually, fast forward, the Red Cross got a hold of him and kind of helped him with refugee camp. And then eventually my dad immigrated to America. So that's my dad's story versus my mom's story, where she like hopped on a boat with her siblings and just went. So the reason I kind of give this little story, that's a little preface for later on. So anyways, so growing up with that, it was
Can I just ask
yeah.
really quickly? Is that like a difficult, you explained it so vividly. Is it a difficult story for your dad to tell? Or did he just tell you once and you remembered? Or um
He told me in little sections. So I would probably, I don't know, I think when I was younger, I would ask, oh, what was it like going across America? You know how some people might tell you the main summary, but they don't tell the
yeah.
details. So then I would, and maybe another time, because I'm a curious kid, I'd ask like, oh, what was it like specifically going from like when you said you went to jail, what was that like? And then he'd explain more. So it was like chunks, and then I put it kind of all together and have it in my head right now.
Okay. I was just curious. I know those aren't the easiest stories. That's a crazy story, but just
Yeah.
curious if he struggles telling you that at all. Like,
It's weird because like, no, he doesn't break down or anything. I guess it's been like 25, 30 years ago or
yeah.
even more. But there's always, I think with a lot of Vietnamese refugees, there's always like this heavy sadness to you when they're trying to recall back on a story,
Yeah.
because you've seen just so many people being killed, during the war. And I think um it just makes me think about when people say, oh, these refugees, we can't take them in, or like they're trying, not we can't take them in, but oh, they're just trying to take advantage of the US and that kind of stuff. And I was like, look, your home condition has to be so terrible to make you even want to uproot your family to leave. Like right now, can you like right now people have a hard time uprooting from their apartment or moving from
Exactly.
one house to another state, you know? So,
Yeah.
imagine like how much would it take for you to have to really leave the US, and flee to another country that you don't know their language and you don't know like anything, And I think a lot of people haven't been put in that situation to understand.
Mm.
So with that story said, there's a lot of guilt tripping in Asian culture. It's very common in Asian culture to be like, why aren't you going to do this with your life or blah blah blah. We came all the way to America and went through all that
Mm.
suffering not for you to do XYZ. So that's like a narrative that's been kind of, I've heard growing up. Or there's eat all your food because there's poor kids in Vietnam like living in poverty. And so my dad's family, they didn't successfully escape or anything like that. So I think he does have a little bit of that guilt for sure. And the rest of them live in Vietnam. And my mom's side, they all happen to live in LA. They originally moved to Virginia first, and then some of them found jobs in LA. And that's how the rest of them are here. So that's like a little synopsis of my parents' story. But because there's so much trauma and there's so much like, are we going to make it mentality, survival and stuff like that, because you come here and the first job you have is like working at a hotel, cleaning hotels or doing catering, or my dad started doing like vocational jobs, so like plumbing or fixing machinery or fixing household appliances. That was his thing, where he worked under a company for that, or even doing janitorial work. So and back then the wage was really low and you're trying to make ends meet, so they couldn't really go to school. And so they didn't have like that education of higher education. And oh yeah, to top off on the trauma more for my dad, his baby brother, his youngest brother, who was probably brilliant, probably would have been an engineer if he like was still alive. But he was the smartest one, sweetest kid out of like my dad's, I don't know, 7, 8 siblings. And he came to America like years later. He was able to get sponsored, but he died maybe a few years later from leukemia. So my dad said when they sent that message or telegrammed that to my grandma back home in Vietnam, she just fainted, because her youngest just like passed away. And he was, from what I've been told, he was like the sweet, perfect child, um, not even a bad bone in his body. So anyway, so I grew up with like those scripts of, I think Asian parents, they want you to, I would say, be successful. They want you to be stable because of the like what they had to go through. They don't want you, so in that case, that's why there's like a stereotype like be doctor, be lawyer, be dentist. So they think, you make money and it's a cush job. Or my parents are like, why don't you work for the government? There's benefits there. You don't have to worry about health insurance and your job is guaranteed, et cetera, et cetera. So I think growing up with that, a lot of us were into, I think a lot of Asians go into jobs that possibly they don't like or that they find just kind of like okay and boring, maybe just because that's what our parents have pushed us to do, but it's also what they've gone through, right? They don't want us to have to go through any of the hardships they are in. And then another conversation for a later time that my one of my friends had was talking about how in a lot of Asian cultures, love is sometimes transactional and it's conditional. Like, we have worked so hard for you, came to America and all that kind of stuff. And we took care of you in exchange. They don't say it like this, but it's kind of like unspoken. But in exchange, you should be taking care of us when we retire, even if that is, even if that means you have no privacy with your husband, partner, whatever, and your children, and we'll be there until the day you die. So, or the day we die. But again, also with, I think, cultures back home, like back in Vietnam versus America, you stay and live with your parents until you get married. Like that's a very normal thing. Whereas here, I would say it's normal to move out. It's normal to go to a college that's super far away, have your own life, rent your own place, and being further away. And that's like normal, right? So, growing up with an older brother, I mean, looking back now, my friend did say, like, I think he has, there might be some mental health issues there because she was studying psychiatry. She's like, I think there's some autism. So again, with Asian culture, when we talked like, previous to recording this, there's uh mental health isn't a thing people talk about because there's
Yeah.
stigma, there's shame, or there's like, oh, I don't want people to know that there's something wrong with my son. Although I think in a way people might say, oh, they're just a bit weird. That's just another way they might say it. But he's smart and he goes to but look, he's successful. He's a pharmacist now and has his place. So there's like the pride in there that's trying to, I think, cover things up. Um, but I did grow up being the responsible kid. It was then, so I think that's a role I continue to play to like have. And I'm trying to, break that in therapy. We talk about like how, because when you're the responsible one at a young age, you kind of you lose your childhood because, children should be children and not be the ones that are adulting so soon. So, but I think part of it's also like, is that personality or is that partial upbringing and things like that? So in an Asian culture, and I've talked about this with other Asian female friends, but the men, the sons are seen, I don't want to say seen more special, but they get away with a lot with more things. And I'm sure there's many cultures that are like that, but for now I'm speaking specifically more Vietnamese, but also probably some other Asian cultures where the sons are, they don't say it, but it's kind of subconscious or it's embedded in the culture where the son is more important or they hold the last name to continue the family name. Um, and maybe it's just like gender expectations, like my brother got away with more things and I had a curfew, when I'm the more independent one. So it was nice going to college away, like far away from them so I can have my own life. I remember like my dad, he can try to check up on me, or my mom would try, or dad really try to check up on me. But if I don't answer my phone, I don't answer my, back then, Sam, we had flip phones.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then, so at that point, when I was younger, in college, I wanted to be a news anchor, so I did media studies. And then I realized that wasn't for me when I realized how, what my teachers say, if it bleeds, it leads. And I just didn't like that. And so and I found out everyone wants to be a news anchor. So there's a lot of competition. And I also thought like, oh, maybe I can be a doctor, save some lives. And then I took biology course, like the advanced course. And I said, nope, I don't have enough passion to save. To do another 12, 20, whatever years of this. And then I just settled on business because it was a generic degree. And I was like, all right, that's kind of like at my school, I think the default, like if you can't place into certain things you don't know, just you can do business and then be done with it.
Yeah.
And
Can I ask, was there something that your parents wanted you to study specifically, or did they interject their thoughts?
oh, yeah, they definitely would prefer I be a doctor, or I grew up Catholic too, and they said you could be a nun as well. Like you can help. And I remember telling my parents, like, what do you mean help? All they do is pray, and they're
Right.
like, but that helps. And I was like, and it's funny because I said, oh, what happens if I majored in English, like English and literature? And my parents were like, no, you already know English. We're not paying for college just for you to go to do English. And I thought to myself, like, but you're okay with me dropping out of college to become a nun.
Right.
So, oh man. So yeah, so that in college is where I kind of, kind of like what we talked before, you kind of find your own, what you like, your own group of friends and things like that. It was a wonderful experience. Probably partied and had too much fun, but still managed to get like A's and B's in school. But,
Yeah.
definitely sleep schedule wise was all over the place. But I remember I just had a lot of fun and just being independent. Looking back now, I didn't realize I was just a very independent person. And so after college, I remember um, not wanting to commit to a job, because I was like, oh, I don't want to be stuck in like a job forever. And this is like what, 2012, 2011. And I met during a summer these foreign exchange students. It was during like those a weekend trip where you can sign up with your college to go like not skydiving, but hang gliding or paragliding. And so there was two British students and one student from Spain. And honestly, that's what inspired me. That's the thing that kind of clicked in my brain in terms of, oh, hey, if they're able to travel here in one piece and it's pretty safe. They were like, okay, that means I could do that too, right? So, and I like to keep my promises. So I told them, I was like, okay, I'm going to visit you guys next year, and so at that point, I worked 2 retail jobs, just saving up at what, $7, $8 an hour, just to save up for a plane
Crazy.
trip and all that kind of stuff for like, I said, like 3 months. I'll do a Euro trip of 3 months. And it was the scariest thing because it's like, back then, no one really traveled like that. It wasn't a thing. No one in my network or my friends group I knew traveled. And I got backlash for, again, with some friends where they were like, well, you're going to ruin your career. You're going to, and like, look at now, no one, like everyone has different resumes, right?
Mm.
And so that's where I knew I lost some of my friendships for sure. And I was fine with that because I think it's just your mind's in a different place now. And so, and I know it sounds cheesy when people say, oh, travel changes your life and stuff, but it really did. It really made me open, meet new people, and see different ways of living. I stay in hostels, so you like see a lot of international people and you learn ways that your country is lacking,
Mm.
and you learn ways that your country is better in doing certain things and other countries are better doing certain things. And also some people had such odd end jobs, but yet they were so happy, so that was a change. And everyone's always freaking surprised when I say, yeah, Americans only get 2 weeks of vacation. They're like, what? Things like that. But I am also thankful knowing that for someone that's in Vietnam, that they barely are making any money. They don't have that privilege to be able to travel around the world
Mm.
and buy a plane ticket. It would take them 5 years to probably buy, like save up and buy a plane ticket. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas here we can. Um, and I know that I, in a way, am privileged too, because not everyone in America can travel, have the means to travel, And yes, I kind of saved up on my own, but some people don't have that same situation, or some people have families that they have to maybe take care of, or they can't escape, or things like that. Everyone's situation is different, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I traveled Europe for 3 months and I wanted to keep traveling. And someone tipped me off saying, like, oh, there's a thing called a working holiday visa. So you can go to a country and you work there legally. It could be odd end jobs, whatever. Could be like temp jobs in the office, or it could be um, hospitality, bartending, waiting tables. And after researching, I saw Australia does it, and back then they pay pretty well. So I remember going home for Thanksgiving and my parents were like, oh my gosh. Because I told them when I was leaving for 3 months, they didn't believe me. And I was like, all right, peace, bye.
Yeah.
And then same thing in Australia. I told them, I said, hey, I'm going to go and be overseas for 2 years. And they're like, okay, whatever. Like if your kid says like, I'm piecing out for 2 years, you won't see me for 2 years. You don't believe it really? And then so I went and I left and went to Australia for a year, worked there, traveled a little bit around. And then after that year, I used that money to travel throughout Asia for another year. So that's 2014. And when I came home, kind of broke and kind of actually burnt out from traveling. Like I think my parents were like relieved that I was alive. And then they also like I would say they cried, but they were teary eyed, like, oh my gosh, my daughter's home. Like, I don't know if they would feel the same way if my brother did the same thing. But it was really hard. Again, like we were talking about parents, and I think that's why we got along really well in able to discuss how like not having the perfect family, right? So, or having that family where you're like, yeah, they're great. I always want to come home to them. And I think that's a
Yeah.
reality. There's a lot of people that I find that don't have that family. But it's not talked about a lot. And what's portrayed in social media or lifestyle blogs and stuff like that is a really tight knit, like type of family and everything where they get along, or, um, but that's not what everyone has, and so I remember thinking like I really want to move to California because I have to LA because I have relatives there. My cousins are there, and the weather's just better. I like after a while getting snow in all 4 seasons, it kind of gets really tiring, especially when you grew up with it. And yeah, so when people say why'd you move to LA, I say the weather, they're like, that's it. I'm like, yeah.
Before you moved out here, you mentioned those few trips that you made, like going to Europe and whatnot. Were you realizing that you were passionate about travel around that time? Or were those just like early trips in your life? Like,
Oh no, the Europe one was the thing that really sparked it. It
okay,
was kind
okay.
of that was the sounds so cheesy saying this. It's like the trip that saved that changed my life. No,
Yeah.
but all in all, though, it really did because that's when I saw everything was just so new.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's nice because you can hop on a 4 hour train ride and you're like, oh, I'm in France. And then hop on a few hours and you're in Italy, and completely different culture, different language, different food and all that stuff. And I think it was definitely when you start off, it's like your first trip, you go through that honeymoon phase of travel and
Yeah.
you're young and you're free and you're just excited about everything. You also, this is my early 20s. So I had the energy to do it. Right.
Yeah. And-
Yeah. And so I think that was where I remember not wanting to go home, but I was running out of money. So that was where
Okay. That'll do it.
I feel like that's the problem of like, yeah, they'll do it. And that's still
Yeah.
today's problems too. Like, oh, ran out of money, got to go back home, work, and then keep working for another vacation, right? And um, I felt so invigorated and just very alive. So that's really what really did it. And that does it for today's episode. Tune in to the next episode for part 2, where I share the latter part of my life of when I moved from Virginia to LA. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button right now so you won't miss out on any episodes coming up. And it will really help us reach more of our vibrant community. And remember, the fun doesn't stop here. The magic continues over at thehappyhealingshop.com, where we keep the conversations going, and you'll find tons of resources there to help you on your spiritual journey. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.